The world changed on a quiet morning, without warning, without signs or omens. It began with a single case, an ordinary man in a small town, collapsing suddenly in the street as if struck by an invisible force. Onlookers stared, horrified, as his skin grew pallid and his veins darkened beneath the surface, snaking across his body like ink spilled on paper. His eyes rolled back, his breath turned ragged, and then, with one final gasp, his body convulsed violently. His blood, when it finally spilled from his mouth, was as black as ink, thick and unnatural, staining the pavement with an oily sheen. The transformation was swift and grotesque. His eyes lost all trace of recognition, turning milky and void. His limbs moved jerkily, as though pulled by strings, and his mouth twisted into a snarl of insatiable hunger. Within minutes, he was no longer the man he had been, no longer capable of reason or recognition. He became a mindless, shambling husk, driven by a primal, insatiable urge that no one could understand. The crowd dispersed in terror as he lunged at the nearest bystander, spreading his contagion with every bite, every desperate swipe. Authorities dismissed it at first, calling it a freak occurrence, an isolated incident that posed no real threat. They spun it as a tragic anomaly, perhaps a side effect of some experimental drug or a misdiagnosed mental break. But as reports of similar cases began to trickle in from nearby towns, then from cities miles away, it became clear that this was no isolated event. The virus, later named the Black Blood virus, spread with a relentlessness that defied all efforts to contain it. It spread through the air, through contact, through blood, infiltrating the bodies of the young and old, the healthy and frail, the rich and poor. Once infected, the victim's blood turned black, coursing through their veins like a dark, insidious curse, stripping away their humanity and leaving behind nothing but violent, mindless predators. Entire communities fell in a matter of days, their once lively streets now echoes of horror, littered with the debris of a civilization in collapse. Cities descended into chaos as the virus devoured the population from within. Governments responded with frantic measures, quarantines, curfews, martial law. But the infection was too fast, too aggressive. The Black Blood virus spread like wildfire, burning through populations and leaving behind charred remnants of what once was. Panic and disorder reigned as the infected roamed, spreading the plague with every bite, every scratch, every drop of their corrupted blood. Survivors now huddle in the shadows, hiding in crumbling buildings, basements, and makeshift shelters, clinging to the last remnants of a world they barely recognize. Some hold out hope, searching for a cure, praying that science or sheer luck will deliver them from the nightmare. Others have given up on hope, driven only by the instinct to survive another day, knowing that the Black Blood could claim them at any moment. Among these survivors is Leo, a teenage boy who had already lost everything long before the virus struck. Orphaned at a young age, Leo was used to being on his own, navigating the foster system and the streets with a resilience beyond his years. When the virus tore through his town, he watched as those around him were consumed by the darkness. Alone and with nothing left to lose, Leo took to the roads, driven by a desperate need to find others like him, survivors who hadn't yet succumbed to the madness. He travels through the ruins of the old world, a lone figure against a backdrop of decay, scavenging for food, avoiding the infected, and clinging to the hope that somewhere, somehow, there are still people worth finding. The Black Blood virus was not just a disease, it was a death knell for humanity's dominance. A stark reminder that nature's fury cannot be tamed. The true horror was not just the infected, but the creeping realization that humans were no longer the apex predators. This is the story of the survivors, the ones who fought back, who refused to give in to the darkness even as it consumed everything around them. They are the last line of defense in a world overrun by fear, bloodlust, and the ever-present threat of a fate worse than death. For Leo, every day is a battle not just for survival, but for a connection, a sign that he isn't the last human left standing against the tide of black blood. Leo moves silently through the skeletal remains of the city, his footsteps careful and measured. The once bustling metropolis was now a ghost town, its towering skyscrapers reduced to hollowed-out husks. Broken windows gaped like empty eyes, and the streets were choked with abandoned cars. Their doors left ajar, belongings scattered as if their owners had fled in a panic. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the faint, distant echoes of the infected, guttural moans and the shuffling of feet. Leo knew better than to linger too long in one place. His backpack, worn and fraying, was slung over one shoulder, the weight of his meager supplies a constant reminder of how precarious his situation was. He needed food, water, and anything else he could scavenge to make it through another day. Leo had learned to make do with whatever he could find. Cans of food from looted stores, water from abandoned buildings, batteries for his flashlight, and anything that could be used as a weapon. But each trip into the city was a gamble, and he was running out of luck. Leo darted into a narrow alley, pressing himself against the wall as he scanned his surroundings. He knew the risks of moving during the day. The infected were more active, their senses heightened, but hunger had forced his hand. He crept forward, spotting a small convenience store at the end of the alley. Its front window was shattered, but the interior looked relatively untouched, at least from a distance. Leo's heart quickened as he considered the possibilities. Food, water, maybe even some medical supplies if he was lucky. He moved quickly but cautiously, stepping over broken glass and debris. Inside, the store was dim, lit only by the weak sunlight filtering through the grime-coated windows. Shelves were overturned and scattered items littered the floor. Leo picked his way through the mess, his eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. He grabbed what he could: cans of soup, a few bottles of water, a half-empty box of granola bars. He stuffed them into his backpack, glancing nervously over his shoulder. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint rustle of plastic and the distant sound of shuffling feet outside. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the store. Leo froze, his breath catching in his throat. He edged closer to the source of the noise, peering around a corner. A figure, hunched and twitching, was clawing at the remnants of a metal shelf. Its head snapped up at the sound of Leo's movement, and for a brief, terrifying moment, they locked eyes. The infected let out a low guttural growl, and Leo bolted. He sprinted back the way he came, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, the infected gave chase, its snarls echoing through the store. Leo burst through the front door, skidding onto the street. But as he rounded the corner, he skidded to a stop, his eyes widening in horror. A horde of infected, dozens of them, blocked the street ahead. Their heads turned in unison, eyes blank and lifeless, their mouths opening in a chorus of hungry growls. Leo's mind raced as he glanced around, desperately searching for an escape. He spotted a fire escape ladder hanging precariously from the side of a building and sprinted towards it. Grabbing the bottom rung, he hoisted himself up just as the infected surged forward, their hands reaching for him. Leo scrambled up the ladder, pulling it up behind him to slow their advance. He climbed higher, leaping onto a nearby rooftop. From his vantage point, he watched the horde swarm below, clawing at the base of the building, driven by their insatiable hunger. He backed away from the edge, breathing hard, his hands trembling. His heart still pounded as he checked his backpack. The supplies were still there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him going a little longer. He took a moment to collect himself, staring out over the ruined city. The infected were still milling about below, their guttural growls a constant reminder of the danger that lurked everywhere. But Leo was alive, and he was still moving. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the crumbling skyline. He knew he couldn't stay here. He had to keep moving, keep searching. Somewhere out there were other survivors, and Leo wasn't ready to give up just yet. He adjusted his backpack and took a deep breath, ready to continue his journey through the desolate city, determined to find a place where he could finally be safe.